Honors, yeah. I mentioned the Dale House, that beautiful Second Empire style house in Madoc. Well, the reason it got built was its owner had this building, the Dale Bank. It was a private bank. In those days, you were allowed to have private banks. And he seemed to make a lot of money. He wanted to show off he made a lot of money, and so he had the Dale House built. Well, between poor investments and a downturn in the economy and the expense of building the Dale House, Mr. Dale went bankrupt. So there was a terrible flurry in town. People did get a percentage of their money back after he declared bankruptcy, but that was the end of Mr. Dale. Him and his family left town. We do have permission to go in and see the vault of the Dale Bank, which is still here. It's very warm in there, and that's why I started my introduction out here. Don't close the door, please, of the vault.
Don't close the door. No. Last word.
Don't be in the... Oh, that's... Okay. I had to rig up extension cords and lights because I could not get any of the lights back here on. So here is the vault. When Higdon's, who had a TV store in town, ran this building, they had an artist come in and redo the original painting because over the years it had faded and was getting hard to read. So they had it redone, and identical to the original. I put a light inside. There's nothing much to see inside, but you can see the size of it, etc. if you go around to the other side. I have no idea why that is pumping out the heat in here, but it's unbearable. But another vault, you can't walk away with this. No. All the business blocks, everything was 2 or 3 stories tall. The one where the village market is today was a very elaborate 3-story building. I featured it on the poster advertising today's walk because on the 3rd floor it had a giant, almost a horseshoe-shaped design in fret, cut-out wood. Sort of somebody would call it gingerbread, but it was just huge, and it just made the building so distinctive. It was an amazing building, and the same thing happened as I mentioned before. It was let go, run down, etc. It was originally built as a hotel, and then later became Walter Brett's Ford dealership. He had the showrooms on the ground floor and the garage at the back in a separate building. It was Tuff's undertaking, and then Mr. Duffin took it over, and the same thing happened in Marmor. I don't know why. There was a Cassidy furniture home and funeral parlor in Marmor. So it's interesting that in both towns that we had a combination furniture store and funeral parlor. The fraternal lodges in Madoc were very active, not only in raising money for charities, but also in the business district. This block here was owned by the Masons, who had their club rooms upstairs and rented out the bottom floor. And when I was growing up, it was Kincaid's grocery store. Then it became a hardware store, and then the new hardware store opened. The next block down was owned by the Oddfellows Lodge, and still is. And their club rooms, again, were upstairs, and they rented out the business to the bottom. So we have to thank our local fraternal organizations for helping maintain some of our buildings. Where the Super Dollar Store is now was a beautiful 3-story building that had a 5 to $1 store and a restaurant in it before it burnt. Now that case is a little different because they think the fire started in the restaurant where the Super Dollar is now. On this side, where this building burned out,
Just recently.
it was a very interesting building. At one time it was a car dealership. Gaylor's had a car dealership, and one of the neat features was because it was built on a slant, The showroom was at ground floor here, but you couldn't drive into it. So they drove into the ground floor of the car showroom. They had an elevator that lifted the cars up to the main floor so they could be viewed from the street. A very neat old feature of that building. The next one was the Empire Theater. I remember going to shows there when I was young. Like a lot of small towns, it closed when TV became so popular. The same thing happened in Marmora. Unfortunately, Madoc wasn't able to just sit there and save it like Sterling did. And you see what they've done. Their theater was closed for many years, and now they've reactivated as a live theater. And it's just marvelous what it's done for the businesses in Sterling. Iron foundry at the back of the property. And he brought iron from north of town. One of the first mines in the area. He smelted it right here at the back of the property, and then had this beautiful house built for his son Fred. Fred also has a connection with Presbyterian Church because he played the organ there for something like 30 years. So Fred was an accomplished person, traveling to Germany, getting his education, etc. We often think of Victorians as, how I put it, pioneers. But really, they were more advanced and hardworking and than we can really believe. If you did well, if you were a merchant and did well, you did send your children to Europe for education or to Toronto or Montreal. So we weren't a backward, out of the way place. Madoc was a really up and coming place. At one time, we were the third largest community on the Wyra River system after Belleville and Canifton.
I'm just wondering what that word means.
But again, the ages vary.
Yeah.
If you were brought up with a certain style,
Yeah.
often, no, I don't care what's in vogue. I want to build my house
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah.
So there's big overlap in
Yeah.
years. I'm going to just stop here for a moment. It's a beautiful view of St. Peter's. The first church in Madoc was a frame church in this area, St. Peter's. It was built in 1854. And the congregation increased and increased, and they had 3 additions on it until it reached 81 feet long, this frame church. It burnt, unfortunately, in 1873 with a fire that swept this whole end of town. The cornerstone of the new church was laid in 1874 and officially opened in 1884. On January 1895, another fire broke out, which greatly damaged the church. There's a story about the tower was saved. Someone went up in the tower and they chopped away the beams that held the balcony to the tower because the balcony was catching on fire. And so when it dropped, the fire didn't get into the tower. So the tower wasn't burned in that fire. The walls were completely, were standing, however. And so when they rebuilt within the walls, and so the present church looks very much like the original stone church that was built. It was designed by Mr. Langley and Burge of Toronto and built by J.P. Shurey of Trenton. And Mr. Wishart arranged for stonemasons from Peterhead in Scotland to come and build the church. When I forgot to mention, when the first church burned, Mr. Wishart, who was the minister, got down on his knees and prayed to save his house, the manse, and he said, "If you save my manse, Lord, I will build you a bigger and greater church." And the manse wasn't burned, and you get this beautiful stone church as a result. The beams for the ceiling were from Duncan Mackenzie's farm, and church members were required to contribute one day's work a week until the church was completed. So if you belong to the church, you expected to help. Ah, wonderful. So we'll go inside and see the beautiful interior.
To make the organ sing for you, because this organ originally cost us $2,000 in 1908, when the Presbyterian Church finally decided that it was okay to have music at services, as long as it didn't interrupt with their congregational procedures. So, anyways, but the organ, which you're welcome to come up and look behind here, and the pipes, this is the only working organ within miles. And anyways, it cost $2,000, and it was built by Mr. Edward Lye of Toronto. And he gave the first recital. So that was in 1908. And this congregation began wearing gowns for choir in 1924, which became acceptable. You'll notice all the dedications on the windows. And what we had to do was we had to put plastic on the outside, plexiglass, so that people would not be breaking them. And it's a pity, but you have to do that. So just meander about. Sid will hit this organ again. Sid, did you want to say it on the organ? You want to say something on the organ? You want to speak something about the organ? Sid Patrick is, I'd say, a doctor of music.
See those pipes up there? It's a fact of physics that the longer and larger the air column, the lower the sound. So each one of those pipes represents a different note. So the biggest ones are the lowest notes. And when you push a key, of which we've got 2 manuals and a keyboard of foot pedals, push any one key, it changes a lever at that pipe that plays that note within no time. So you can play very fast and very whatever, and still the thing can keep up with you. At one point, pipe organs were the only way to go, and in the 1600s, they had little boys piping bellows to keep the air going through. We now have a bellows downstairs, so that's not necessary. But the thing has quite a range, and this one has been beautifully built. Our organ trainer told us that even the painting on these is very special and very accurate, carefully done, and will last through the generations. He came to refurbish it and said it would probably last safely another 30 years before much had to be done with it. But it's little felt pads that get opened, so those things in 100 years dry up, and again, we've been very fortunate. It's a beautiful sounding thing. Can I play you something on it?
This is something like the walls that surrounded the front of the church when I was growing up. The thing I remember different was the walls in front had stones cut into an arch, a pointed arch. And they were beautiful. All the way along the wall was this pointed arch stonework on all sides at the front. And as I say, I'm trying to remember when they were tearing down, but I can't. I just wanted to mention what I call the bake shop. It was built as a commercial bake shop. As you can see, it's a tea room and antique store. The original bake shop ovens are still at the back of the tea room. So if you go in for tea or to browse in the antiques, ask to see the original bake ovens. When I was growing up, when we had a big dinner and the turkey was too big for our oven, Mom would bring it up and Mr. Warren, the baker, would bake it for her in the bake ovens because they were large and could handle like a 25, 30-pound turkey where Mom's stove couldn't. When I was growing up, that was a gas station.
Yeah, right.
There was one on the corner here that it was a garage. Hewland's, was it? Hewland's Garage, yes. It was on that corner where the parking lot sign is. Yes. I just wanted to mention the fire hall, built in 1927, and it was in use all the time I was growing up until Madoc built a fire hall down south of, well, opposite where the skate park is. They used that one until recently, and they built the new one out on St. Lawrence Street East. But I want you to imagine a big brick and frame building where the Becker's store here was. It filled that entire block, and it was a grist mill. And there's the remnants of the dam that ran the grist mill and the water wheel that ran the grist mill there. And try to picture back where the three-story building is on Highway 62. If you're on that side, you'll be able to see it. There was a huge mill pond there. And you get a glimpse of it in the one picture I showed you, showing standing on the bridge looking up at the Anglican Church. There was, in the 1880s, there was a malaria outbreak in Madoc, and they blasted the big dams out to release the water because the mosquitoes were causing the malaria. And so that got rid of all the mill ponds, and this remnants of the dam is all that's left of it. We're going to walk now. I just wanted to mention that if you stand here and look down St. Lawrence Street past the Legion, at the commercial buildings there, just on the same side as the Legion but past it, that's the kind of streetscape you would have seen prior to the 1873 fire that swept this whole part of the village. Oh, okay. Mostly they were frame buildings with squared off at the top to make it look like a commercial building, that kind of thing, and a sloped roof at the back, or a gable roof hidden by the squared off front.
Shut up. That's cowboy.
Everyone, and welcome to our parish of Sacred Heart of Mary, which has existed for 132 years. I would like to introduce Lisa Lee, who has just recently retired from the Sunday School in Marmara. And she will talk about the articles in the church in the meeting, while I will try to do a brief history. But about 1850, Father Brennan had the first frame Catholic church, which is 20 feet by 30 feet, built at the site of the old Catholic cemetery, which is out close to the bypass on the other side of the river store. You ever wonder what some of those stones seem to be leaving?
In this sanctuary, we have at the back a centermost altar called the Altar of Repose. And in the middle of the altar, you see the tabernacle, and in that tabernacle is the Holy Eucharist. On each side of the Holy Eucharist, you see candles and guardian angels, which remind us that Jesus is present here, and that it is a reverent area. As also mentioned over here, the Lady of Fatima's shrine. And if you look at the bottom, you will see a picture portraying the three children seen from Fatima. And the shrine was blessed and is now only one of a few shrines in Ontario.